The acrid smell of smoke clung to Kendra Simone Washington's blonde braids as she emerged from the burning warehouse, her athletic frame carrying an unconscious teenager to safety. The golden beads in her hair caught the early morning light, a stark contrast to the darkness of the scene around her. At 28, she had already saved more lives than she could count, but each rescue still felt like the first, heart-pounding, adrenaline-fueled, necessary. "I got another one," she called out to the paramedics, her deep brown eyes scanning the area for any signs of additional victims. The warehouse fire had started just before dawn, and Engine 27 had been first on the scene. As she watched the medical team take over, Kendra unconsciously cracked her knuckles, a habit that surfaced whenever tension built up inside her. Back at the station, after the debriefing, she sat in front of her locker, exhausted but satisfied. Lauryn Hill's voice flowed through her earbuds, a soulful reminder of simpler times. Her phone buzzed with an email notification that made her heart skip a beat. First responders, housing program, final notice. Kendra had been eyeing the program for months, a chance at home ownership, at having something truly hers, something permanent, safe. But that one requirement, being married, felt like a cruel joke. She could run into burning buildings without hesitation, but marriage, that word alone brought back memories she'd rather forget, of hands that promised to protect, but chose to hurt instead. "Washington," Captain Rodriguez's voice cut through her thoughts. "Your old boss is here to see you." Standing in the station's entrance was Nolan Gregory Frost, and the sight of him nearly knocked the wind out of her. 6 feet of controlled precision in a perfectly pressed flannel shirt, his long brown hair tied back in a neat bun, and that full beard she remembered all too well. Those grey-blue eyes held the same intensity they had 6 months ago when she'd handed in her resignation. "Kendra," he said, his voice carrying the weight of unfinished business, "we need to talk." She straightened her cargo pants and adjusted her empowerment t-shirt, armor against whatever was coming. "About what, Mr. Frost? The security protocols I flagged before leaving, or the way your board swept them under the rug?" His jaw tightened, a subtle tell she recognized from their past interactions. Nolan was a Virgo through and through, methodical, perfectionist, and currently very uncomfortable. He clutched his trademark navy blue coffee mug like a lifeline. "About making things right," he replied, those stormy eyes meeting hers. "And about why you're still using the analyst access codes to monitor our systems." Kendra felt her defenses rise. Yes, she'd been keeping tabs on the startup's security vulnerabilities, not for herself, but for the thousands of users whose data was at risk. "Someone has to," she shot back, crossing her arms. "I know," Nolan said softly, surprising her, "and I need your help to fix it." Officially, the conversation moved to a nearby diner. Her choice? Not his upscale usual, over plates of chicken and waffles, hers, and black coffee, his. Nolan laid out the situation. He'd discovered deeper issues within the company, patterns that matched her original concerns, but addressing them would mean going against powerful board members, potentially risking everything he'd built. "Why now?" Kendra asked, adding more hot sauce to her waffles. The sweet and spicy combination helped ground her, even as her world threatened to tilt on its axis. Nolan set down his mug, the antique watch on his wrist, catching the fluorescent light. "Because you were right," he admitted. "And because I've spent 6 months trying to sleep at night, knowing I let you walk away for doing the right thing." The honesty in his voice hit her hard. This was the Nolan she'd glimpsed occasionally during late-night coding sessions, the one who cared about more than profit margins and user metrics, the one who'd made her wonder, just for a moment, if not all men were like her ex. Her phone buzzed again, another reminder about the housing program deadline. Nolan's eyes caught the notification, and something shifted in his expression. "You're applying for the first responders program. Trying to," she corrected, unconsciously cracking her knuckles again. "But apparently saving lives isn't enough. They want a marriage certificate too." The silence that followed was heavy with possibility. Nolan's fingers drummed against his coffee mug, a rhythmic pattern that matched the lo-fi beats playing softly in the diner's background. When he finally spoke, his words would change everything. "Size, what if I could help you with that?" Kendra's fork clattered against her plate. "Excuse me." "A marriage of convenience," he elaborated, his businesslike tone at odds with the magnitude of what he was suggesting. "You get your house, I get your expertise to fix the company's issues, and we both get what we need without—" "Without what?" she challenged, her heart racing for reasons she refused to examine. "Without complicating things with emotions," he finished, though something flickered in those grey-blue depths that belied his casual tone. Kendra should have laughed, should have walked away. Instead, she found herself considering it, a fake marriage to her former boss, the same man who'd let her resign rather than fight the board, the same man who was now offering to help her achieve her dream of independence, even as he asked for her help in return. "You're serious," she stated, studying his face for any sign of deception. "Completely." He pulled out a pen and grabbed a napkin. "We can draw up terms right now. Professional, practical, no mess, no complications." As she watched him write, his handwriting as meticulous as everything else about him, Kendra felt fate's ironic humor. Here she was, a woman who'd sworn off depending on anyone, considering a fake marriage to a man who planned love like a business transaction. "You do realize how crazy this sounds?" she asked, even as she reached for the pen. Nolan's lips curved into a rare smile. Sometimes the craziest solutions are the most logical ones. Outside, Atlanta's summer heat pressed against the diner's windows, while inside, two people who'd sworn to keep life simple were about to make it infinitely more complicated. As Kendra signed the napkin, Lauryn Hill's voice echoed in her earbuds, "Baby, don't you know that love's gonna get you?" Neither of them could have known how prophetic those words would prove to be. The courthouse stood imposing against Atlanta's clear blue sky, its classical columns a stark reminder of the weight of legal bonds. Kendra adjusted her simple white blazer dress, her fingers automatically reaching for the golden beads in her braids, a nervous gesture she'd developed over years of facing challenges head-on. Beside her, Nolan looked more like he was heading into a board meeting than his own wedding, his charcoal suit impeccably pressed, his brown hair neatly tied back. "Last chance to back out," she murmured, cracking her knuckles one by one. The sound echoed in the quiet morning air. Nolan checked his grandfather's antique watch, a gesture so characteristically him, it almost made her smile. "The housing program deadline is in 3 weeks. We stick to the plan." His voice carried its usual calculated certainty, but something else lingered beneath. Concern, perhaps. "Unless you're having second thoughts." "No," Kendra replied firmly, squaring her shoulders. She'd faced worse fears than a fake marriage to her former boss. The memory of her last relationship flickered through her mind, the control, the manipulation, the slow erosion of her identity. But this was different. This was business. Clean. Professional, safe. Inside, they moved through security and found their way to the marriage bureau. The fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow over everything, making the whole scene feel even more surreal. As they waited, Kendra pulled out her phone, letting the smooth sounds of TLC flow through one earbud, her personal form of meditation. "The rings," Nolan suddenly whispered, his eyes widening slightly. It was the first time she'd seen him caught off guard. "We forgot about rings." Before Kendra could respond, he was already pulling something from his pocket, 2 simple gold bands. Of course he'd thought of everything. That was Nolan Gregory Frost. Meticulous, prepared, always 3 steps ahead. "They were my grandparents," he explained, his voice unusually soft. "My grandmother gave them to me before she passed, said they should go to a marriage built on trust." He paused, those grey-blue eyes meeting hers. Seemed fitting somehow. The weight of the moment hung between them. These weren't just props for their performance, they were pieces of his family history. Kendra felt her throat tighten. "Nolan, we can't—" "We can," he interrupted gently. "They've been sitting in a drawer for years. At least this way they'll help build something good." Before she could argue further, their names were called. The ceremony was brief, clinical, exactly what they'd planned. Yet when Nolan slipped his grandmother's ring onto her finger, his touch lingering just a moment too long, Kendra felt something shift in the carefully constructed walls around her heart. "By the power vested in me," the clerk droned, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." No kiss. They hadn't planned for one, hadn't even discussed it. Instead, they shook hands, a businessman's conclusion to a business arrangement. But their fingers remained intertwined a heartbeat longer than necessary. "Congratulations, Mrs. Frost," the clerk said, stamping their marriage certificate. Washington Frost, Kendra corrected automatically. She hadn't fought so hard to build her own identity, just to lose it in a fake marriage. Nolan's lips curved into an almost smile. Washington Frost it is. Outside, Atlanta's humidity wrapped around them like a thick blanket. Reality began to sink in. They were married, on paper at least. Now came the hard part, convincing everyone else it was real. We should celebrate, Nolan suggested, loosening his tie slightly. Maintain appearances. Kendra raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. Some fancy rooftop restaurant with wine pairings and portions too small to feed a bird. Actually, he pulled out his phone, I found a place that serves chicken and waffles with house-made hot sauce. Unless you'd prefer the bird food. The surprise must have shown on her face, because his almost smile grew into a real one. It transformed his entire face, softening the sharp edges of his usual corporate mask. For a moment, she glimpsed the man behind the perfectionist CEO, the one who remembered her favorite comfort food, who kept his grandmother's rings, who came back to make things right. At the restaurant, over plates piled high with golden waffles and crispy chicken, they began planning their charade. The housing program would require proof of cohabitation, which meant, "You'll move in with me," Nolan stated, as if discussing a merger strategy. "My place is closer to both the station and the office. We'll need to make it look lived in by both of us before the home inspection." Kendra sipped her strawberry milkshake, considering the implications. "Ground rules," she said firmly. "I need space, physical and emotional. No unexpected visitors, no prying into each other's personal lives beyond what's necessary for appearances." "Agreed." He pulled out his phone, creating a new document. "I'll draft a detailed agreement." "No." Kendra placed her hand over his phone. "No contracts, no paperwork. We do this on trust or not at all." Their eyes met across the table, a silent battle of wills. Finally, Nolan nodded, putting his phone away. "Trust it is." As they finished their meal, Kendra's phone buzzed with a notification from the station, a reminder about the upcoming department gala. Her stomach dropped. "The annual firefighters' benefit," she groaned. "It's in 2 weeks. They'll expect my husband to be there." "Then he'll be there," Nolan replied simply. "We knew we'd have to make public appearances convincing." "It's not just appearing," she explained. "These people know me. They'll see through any act that's not completely genuine." Nolan considered this, his fingers absently tracing the rim of his coffee mug. "Then we'll have to get to know each other, really know each other. Beyond work, beyond this arrangement." He looked up at her. "Starting now? What do you mean?" "Tell me something real," he challenged softly. Something the real Kendra Washington would tell her real husband. The request caught her off guard. This wasn't part of their plan, wasn't covered in their careful negotiations. But as she looked at him, really looked at him, she realized he was right. They needed more than a shared address to pull this off. "I'm scared," she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Not of the fire or the danger, or even this crazy plan. I'm scared of needing someone again, of letting anyone close enough to matter." The vulnerability in her voice surprised them both. Nolan's expression softened, and for a moment he looked like he wanted to reach across the table. Instead, he shared something of his own. "I haven't slept well since you left the company," he confessed. "Every security alert, every system update, I keep waiting for something to go wrong. Not because of the technology, but because the one person who always told me the truth wasn't there anymore." The honesty in his voice wrapped around them like a warm blanket, making their public celebration feel suddenly intimate. As they sat there, two people bound by paper but separated by walls of their own making, neither could shake the feeling that they'd just stepped onto a path that would lead them far beyond their carefully drawn boundaries. Outside, the Atlanta sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Tomorrow, they would begin their life together, a life built on convenience and necessity. But for now, in this moment, they were just two people sharing truths over cooling coffee and the remnants of shared comfort food, while Erykah Badu's soulful voice drifted from the restaurant's speakers. "But you can't rush your healing." Moving day arrived with Atlanta's typical morning heat, the sun already blazing as Kendra pulled up to Nolan's brownstone in her pickup truck. She sat for a moment, taking in the pristine facade with its perfectly maintained window boxes. Everything about the place screamed Nolan, orderly, elegant, controlled. Her fingers found their way to her neck, where her grandmother's gold chain held her new wedding ring. She couldn't bring herself to wear it on her finger when she was fighting fires. The front door opened before she could reach it, revealing Nolan in a sight she'd never expected. Worn jeans and a faded Bon Iver t-shirt, his long hair loose around his shoulders. The casual look suited him in a way that made her pause. "Coffee's ready," he said by way of greeting, stepping aside to let her in. The rich aroma of freshly ground beans filled the air, mixing with something else. Was that breakfast? The interior of his home was exactly what she'd imagined, and yet somehow more. Clean lines and modern furniture in shades of grey and blue, but with unexpected touches of warmth. Old books, vintage vinyl records, and photographs that spoke of a life beyond boardrooms and business deals. "Your room is upstairs," he explained, leading her through the house. "So I thought you might want to make it your own space." The bedroom was spacious, with large windows overlooking a small garden. What caught her attention wasn't the high-end furniture or the walk-in closet, but the small details: a vintage record player on a side table, a collection of R&B albums carefully selected and arranged, and a framed photo of Engine 27's crew. "You did research," she said, turning to face him. "Thorough preparation is key to any successful venture," he replied, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "Is it too much?" Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. A shift change at the station. "Sorry, they need me to cover. I'll have to unpack later." "I can help," he offered, then caught himself. If that wouldn't cross any boundaries. Kendra hesitated. The idea of Nolan handling her personal belongings, seeing the pieces of her life. "Just the basics for now. Clothes, toiletries. The rest can wait." They worked in surprisingly comfortable silence, broken only by the lo-fi playlist flowing from Nolan's sound system. He maintained a respectful distance, organizing without invading, efficient yet considerate. It wasn't until she opened her makeup bag that the first real test of their arrangement came. Her bottle of Yves Saint Laurent Libre perfume, her signature scent and personal armor, had leaked during the move, its strong, feminine aroma filling the air. "I'll clean it up," she said quickly, reaching for the bag. But Nolan was already there with a cloth. Their hands brushed, and for a moment, neither moved. The perfume's scent enveloped them, creating an unexpected intimacy in the space between professional distance and forced familiarity. Nolan broke the silence first. "You should get to the station. I can handle this." At work, Kendra threw herself into the familiar routine of equipment checks and training drills, trying to ignore the strange feeling of having a home to return to. Her crew, however, had other ideas. "So when do we meet this mystery husband?" Rodriguez asked during their lunch break. "The whole station's buzzing about your sudden marriage." Kendra maintained her composure, though her knuckles cracked beneath the table. "At the gala," she replied, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. "He's looking forward to meeting everyone." The shift dragged on, filled with minor calls and paperwork. By the time she returned to the brownstone, it was past midnight. She expected to find a quiet, dark house, but soft light spilled from the kitchen, along with the gentle sounds of jazz. Nolan sat at the kitchen island, laptop open, his hair back in its usual neat bun. The space around him was organized chaos, papers spread out in precise patterns, multiple coffee cups standing guard. "You're still up," she observed, dropping her keys in the bowl by the door, a small domestic gesture that felt strangely significant. "Board meeting tomorrow," he explained, rubbing his tired eyes. "The security audit you recommended, it's revealing exactly what you warned us about, and more." Kendra moved to the refrigerator, seeking refuge in routine, but stopped short. On the door, held by a simple magnet, was a firefighter's schedule template, her schedule, along with takeout menus from her favorite local spots. "I thought it would make sense," Nolan said, noticing her pause, "for appearances." "Right," she murmured, "appearances." But something about his thoughtfulness made her chest tighten. "Have you eaten?" "I had," he gestured vaguely at an empty protein bar wrapper. Without thinking, Kendra moved to the stove. "That's not food." She began pulling ingredients from the meticulously organized pantry. "Now, since we're both up, Might as well have a real meal. As she cooked, Nolan cleared his work away, creating space while maintaining a careful distance. The kitchen filled with the aroma of spices and the sound of sizzling vegetables. It was domestic, normal, dangerous. "You don't have to do this," he said softly. "I know." She focused on the pan in front of her. "But married people eat together, right? Even fake married people." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Is that in our unwritten rules? Consider it an amendment." She slid a plate of stir-fry in front of him. "Besides, someone needs to ensure you don't survive solely on coffee and protein bars." They ate in companionable silence, the late hour and shared food creating a bubble of intimacy neither had anticipated. Nolan's normally perfect posture relaxed slightly, and Kendra found herself humming along to the jazz playing in the background. "About the gala," he said finally, setting down his fork. "We should practice." "Practice what?" "Being married, dancing, the little things couples know about each other." He stood, offering his hand. "May I?" Kendra stared at his outstretched hand, her heart racing. This wasn't in their agreement. This wasn't business. This was "One dance," she conceded, taking his hand. "For practice." Nolan pulled her gently into position, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers. The jazz shifted to a slower melody, and they began to move. He was a better dancer than she expected, leading with the same quiet confidence he brought to everything else. "Your crew will ask questions," he murmured, guiding her through a turn. "About how we met, how I proposed." "They already are," she admitted, following his lead. "We need a story that's believable." "The truth," he suggested, "just edited. Former employee discovers company issues. Boss realizes she was right. They reconnect, fall in love." "Simple," she said, but her voice wavered slightly. "The best lies contain truth," he replied, his hand warm against her back. They continued dancing, refining their story between steps, neither mentioning how natural it felt. When the song ended, they stayed in position for a moment too long, the late hour and shared space making everything feel less defined. "We should sleep," Kendra said finally, stepping back. "Early shifts tomorrow." Nolan nodded, releasing her. "Good night, Mrs. Washington Frost." "Good night, Mr. Frost." In her room, Kendra stood by the window watching the city lights flicker. The ring on her necklace chain felt heavier somehow, weighted with complications she hadn't anticipated. Below, she could hear Nolan moving through his evening routine, the soft click of lights being turned off, the gentle hum of the dishwasher starting its cycle. This was their dance now, a careful choreography of distance and proximity, truth and pretense. As she finally lay down to sleep, Erykah Badu's words drifted through her mind. "Keep in mind that I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my shit." She smiled wryly at the ceiling. Sensitive wasn't supposed to be part of this arrangement. But then again, neither was dancing in the kitchen at midnight. 3 days before the gala, Kendra stood in front of her bathroom mirror, studying her reflection, while Lauryn Hill's voice filled the steam-filled space. The morning shift had been brutal, a 3-alarm fire in a downtown office building that left her muscles aching and her mind racing. But it wasn't the fire that had her on edge. It was the invitation sitting on her dresser, gold lettering announcing the annual Firefighters Benefit Gala. A knock on the bathroom door interrupted her thoughts. "Kendra," Nolan's voice carried through the wood. "My mother's here." Her heart stopped. What? She wasn't prepared for this, hadn't planned for meeting Maureen Frost yet, and now she was in the neighborhood, Nolan explained, his tone suggesting this was as unexpected for him as it was for her. "I can ask her to come back another time." Kendra closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The scent of her Libra perfume grounded her. "No, it's fine. Give me 5 minutes." She heard his footsteps retreat, followed by the soft murmur of voices downstairs. Looking in the mirror again, she adjusted her casual weekend attire, dark jeans and a fitted black t-shirt with empowering words across the front. Her blonde braids were freshly done, the golden beads catching the bathroom light. This wasn't how she'd planned to meet her mother-in-law, but then again, nothing about this marriage was going according to plan. Downstairs, she found Nolan in the kitchen with an elegant woman in her early 60s. Maureen Frost carried herself with graceful confidence, her silver blonde hair styled in a sophisticated bob. The resemblance to her son was striking, especially in those piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through pretense. "So this is the woman who turned my son's world upside down," Maureen said warmly, stepping forward to embrace Kendra before she could prepare herself. The older woman's light floral perfume wrapped around them both. "I've been dying to meet you." "Mother," Nolan warned, but there was affection in his tone. He stood by the kitchen island, sleeves rolled up, preparing what appeared to be his signature French press coffee. "What? Can't a mother be curious about the woman who managed to get my workaholic son to embrace spontaneity?" Maureen's eyes twinkled. "A courthouse wedding. No planning, no grand gesture. It's so un-Nolan-like." "I love it." Kendra felt her practice story stick in her throat. There was something about Maureen's genuine warmth that made their deception feel heavier. "Sometimes," she found herself saying, "the right decision doesn't need elaborate planning." Nolan's hands stilled on the coffee press, his eyes meeting hers across the kitchen. For a moment, something unspoken passed between them. "Exactly." Maureen settled herself at the kitchen island, her designer outfit somehow perfect against the modern decor. "Now, tell me everything. How are you settling in? Is my son remembering that there's life beyond spreadsheets and board meetings?" Before Kendra could respond, her phone buzzed. A message from Captain Rodriguez about last-minute gala preparations. "Speaking of life beyond work," she said, showing Nolan the message, "we need to finalize details for Saturday." "The gala?" Maureen's face lit up. "Oh, you must let me help. I have the perfect jewelry that would complement your dress." "Mother," Nolan interrupted gently, "I'm sure Kendra has everything planned." But Maureen was already reaching into her designer bag, pulling out a velvet box. "These were your grandmother's," she explained, opening it to reveal a stunning pair of pearl and diamond earrings. "She always said they should go to the woman who brought real love into the family." The weight of those words hung in the air. Kendra felt her fingers instinctively move to crack her knuckles, but Nolan caught her hand in his. The gesture was so natural, so protective, that for a moment she forgot it was part of their act. "To us, they're beautiful," she managed, her voice thick with emotion she didn't want to examine too closely. "Like you," Nolan said softly, and something in his tone made her look up sharply. His eyes held an expression she'd never seen before, something raw and unguarded that made her breath catch. Maureen watched this exchange with knowing eyes, a small smile playing at her lips. "You know what's wonderful," she mused, her voice gentle, "are watching two people who think they're pretending when really—" "Mother," Nolan cut in, his hand tightening slightly around Kendra's. "I'm just saying," Maureen continued, standing to leave. "Sometimes the heart knows what it wants before the head catches up." She kissed them both on the cheek, leaving a trace of her floral perfume. "Don't forget to water the plants, darling. And Kendra, the earrings are yours. No returns." After she left, silence filled the kitchen. Kendra stared at the velvet box, feeling the weight of family history and unexpected emotions. "Your mother is perceptive," Nolan finished, running a hand through his hair. "Too perceptive." "We convinced her though, right?" Kendra asked, trying to ignore the way her skin still tingled where he'd held her hand. Nolan turned to face her fully, his usual composed expression slightly frayed at the edges. "Did we?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to face. Kendra stepped back, creating physical distance to match the emotional walls she needed to maintain. "I should review the gala seating arrangements. Captain Rodriguez." "Kendra," Nolan's voice stopped her retreat. "About what my mother said." "It's fine," she cut him off. "She bought our story. That's what matters." "Is it?" The intensity in his eyes made her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with their arrangement. "It has to be," she replied, more firmly than she felt. "This is business, remember?" Nolan nodded slowly, his CEO mask sliding back into place. "Right, business." He turned back to the coffee press, his movements precise and controlled. "We should practice our entrance for the gala. Your crew will be watching closely." Kendra grabbed her phone, grateful for the change of subject. "I have a dress fitting this afternoon." The boutique had a last-minute cancellation. "I'll drive you," he offered automatically. When she started to protest, he added, a husband would drive his wife to a fitting for their first public event together. She couldn't argue with his logic. even if every fiber of her being warned against spending more time alone with him after the intensity of the morning. Fine, but we're taking my truck. The drive to the boutique was quiet, filled only with the sounds of TLC playing softly through the speakers. Kendra kept her eyes fixed on the road, trying not to notice how naturally Nolan's hand rested on the gearshift, or how his cologne, Bleu de Chanel, mixed perfectly with the leather seats. At the boutique, she expected him to wait in the reception area. Instead, he followed her in, speaking quietly with the consultant while Kendra was whisked away to try on her selection, a deep burgundy gown with a subtle shimmer. When she emerged from the fitting room, Nolan's reaction made her freeze. He stood slowly, his eyes traveling from her golden beads to the way the dress hugged her athletic frame, down to her feet and back up to meet her gaze. The intensity in his expression stole her breath. "You look," he started, then cleared his throat. The housing inspector would be convinced. Reality crashed back in. Right. The housing inspector, their agreement, the lines they couldn't cross. "The hem needs adjusting," she said briskly, turning to the mirror to hide the flush in her cheeks. But in the reflection, she caught Nolan running his hand through his hair. A gesture she was learning meant he was wrestling with something beyond his careful control. That evening, back at the brownstone, they moved through their new domestic routine like dancers avoiding collision. Nolan worked at his laptop while Kendra prepared dinner, the kitchen filled with the aroma of her signature spicy chicken stir-fry. Neither mentioned the morning's intensity or the moment at the boutique. It wasn't until she was placing his plate in front of him that he spoke. "We need to discuss the gala's security protocols." Kendra paused. "What do you mean?" "I've been reviewing the venue's setup," he explained, pulling up blueprints on his laptop. "The external security has gaps that concern me." She leaned over his shoulder to look, momentarily forgetting their careful distance. Her braids brushed his shoulder, and she felt him stiffen slightly. "You're worried about the company's enemies." "I'm worried about you," he corrected softly. "After the security breaches you uncovered, there could be people who'd want to discourage further investigation." The protectiveness in his voice made her heart skip. "I can take care of myself," she reminded him, but her tone lacked its usual edge. "I know." He turned to face her, their faces inches apart. "But you shouldn't have to. Not alone. Not anymore." For a moment, neither moved. The air between them crackled with something that had nothing to do with their arrangement, and everything to do with the way his eyes dropped to her lips before snapping back up. The oven timer's shrill beep shattered the moment. Kendra stepped back quickly, nearly knocking over her chair. "I should check on the vegetables." "Right," Nolan agreed, his voice rougher than usual. "And I should call the security team." Later that night, as Kendra lay in bed listening to the familiar sounds of Nolan's evening routine below, she touched the pearls on her nightstand, Maureen's gift, her new inheritance in this pretend marriage that was beginning to feel dangerously real. Sometimes the heart knows what it wants before the head catches up. Maureen's words echoed in her mind as she drifted off to sleep, her dreams filled with burgundy dresses, protective hands, and the increasingly familiar scent of Bleu de Chanel. The night of the gala arrived with an unexpected autumn storm. Lightning illuminated the Atlanta skyline as Kendra stood in front of her full-length mirror, carefully fastening Maureen's pearl earrings. The burgundy dress caught the light like liquid fire, highlighting every curve that years of firefighting had sculpted. Her blonde braids were swept up elegantly, the golden beads creating a crown-like effect that made her feel both powerful and vulnerable. A soft knock on her door broke her reverie. "Kendra?" Nolan's voice carried a note she hadn't heard before. "Are you ready?" She opened the door, and time seemed to stop. Nolan stood there in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his long brown hair tied back in a neat bun, his beard trimmed to emphasize his strong jawline. But it was his expression that caught her breath, the way his grey-blue eyes widened slightly, the subtle parting of his lips as he took her in. He started, then cleared his throat. "You look incredible." Before she could respond, he pulled out a small velvet box. "I thought, since you're wearing mother's earrings." Inside lay a delicate pearl bracelet that perfectly matched the earrings. "Nolan," she breathed, "we said no more family jewelry." "This isn't family," he admitted softly. "I bought it today, for you." His fingers brushed her wrist as he fastened the clasp, sending sparks of electricity through her skin. The moment was interrupted by a text from Captain Rodriguez. "Can't wait to meet the man who finally captured our Kendra's heart." Reality crashed back in. This wasn't real. The jewelry, the formal wear, the way Nolan's touch lingered on her wrist. It was all for show, wasn't it? The drive to the venue was charged with unspoken tension. Kendra found herself hyper-aware of every movement. The way Nolan's hand occasionally brushed hers when he shifted gears. The subtle scent of his Bleu de Chanel mixing with her Libre perfume in the confined space of his luxury car. "Remember," she said, trying to focus on their plan. "Rodriguez will be watching closely. He's known me since I started at the station." "I remember everything about you," Nolan replied quietly, his eyes fixed on the road. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning neither dared to examine. The Grand Hyatt's ballroom took her breath away. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over elegant table settings, while floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the storm raging outside. Fire department brass mingled with city officials and benefactors, creating a sea of formal wear and practiced smiles. As they entered, Nolan's hand found the small of her back, a gesture that should have felt practiced but instead sent warmth spreading through her entire body. Heads turned, conversations paused. They made quite the picture. The dedicated firefighter and the powerful CEO brought together by fate and, what else? "Kendra!" Rodriguez's booming voice cut through the crowd. He approached with his wife Maria, both beaming. "So this is the mystery man." Nolan stepped forward smoothly, his arm never leaving Kendra's waist. "Nolan Frost, I've heard so much about you, Captain." "Likewise," Rodriguez grinned. "Though I have to say, when Kendra quit her job at your company, I never expected this plot twist." Maria nudged her husband. "Don't embarrass them, dear." She turned to Kendra with knowing eyes. "Though I have to ask, how did he propose?" The practiced story rose to Kendra's lips, but Nolan spoke first. "Actually," he said, his voice soft with what sounded like genuine emotion, "it wasn't a traditional proposal. We were having coffee at her favorite diner, discussing everything that had gone wrong at the company, and I realized something." His hand tightened slightly on her waist. "I realized I'd rather lose everything else than lose her again." Kendra's heart thundered in her chest. This wasn't their rehearsed story. This was something else entirely. "That's so romantic," Maria sighed. "And now look at you both. You can see the love just radiating off you." Before either could respond, the opening notes of the first dance filled the ballroom. Nolan turned to Kendra, extending his hand. "Mrs. Washington Frost." They moved onto the dance floor as if in a dream, his hand on her waist, hers on his shoulder, a mirror of their midnight kitchen practice, but charged with new energy. The storm outside cast dramatic shadows through the windows, lightning occasionally illuminating their faces. "You went off script," Kendra murmured as they swayed to the music. "Sometimes the truth is better than any story we could invent," he replied, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her dizzy. "What truth?" The question hung between them as he guided her through a turn. When she came back to his arms, he pulled her slightly closer. "The truth about why I really came back that day at the station, why I suggested this arrangement, why I can't—" A loud crash of thunder cut through the moment, followed by flickering lights. The music stuttered, then stopped. Emergency lights kicked in, casting an eerie glow over the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen," the hotel manager announced, "please remain calm. Our backup generators will—" Another crash, but this time it wasn't thunder. Screams erupted from the lobby. Kendra's firefighter instincts kicked in immediately. She kicked off her heels, ready to move, but Nolan's grip on her waist tightened. "The security gaps," he said urgently. "This isn't a coincidence." Before she could process his words, smoke began seeping under the ballroom doors. The fire alarm blared to life, its harsh sound cutting through the elegant evening like a knife. "Kendra!" Rodriguez called out. "We need to evacuate everyone." She turned back to Nolan, their faces inches apart in the emergency lighting. "I have to help." "I know," he said, and then, before she could move, he pulled her close and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was brief but fierce, filled with everything they hadn't said. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with emotion. "Be careful." As Kendra ran toward the growing chaos, her pearl bracelet catching the emergency lights, she could still feel the ghost of his kiss on her lips. This wasn't part of their agreement, this wasn't business. This was real as the smoke filling the air and the fear in his eyes as he watched her run toward danger instead of away from it. The storm raged on outside, but inside, something else was burning, something that no amount of firefighting training had prepared her to extinguish. Smoke curled through the Grand Hyatt's elegant corridors as Kendra ran barefoot toward the chaos, her burgundy dress hitched up to allow movement. Behind her, she could hear Rodriguez coordinating with hotel security, but her mind was split between the immediate crisis and the lingering sensation of Nolan's kiss. Focus. Lives were at stake. The source of the smoke became clear as they reached the hotel's east wing. A series of small strategic fires had been set, blocking primary evacuation routes. This wasn't an accident. This was planned. Someone's trying to trap the guests, she called out to Rodriguez, her tactical training kicking in. The realization hit her hard. Nolan had been right about the security threats. In the distance, sirens wailed, Engine 27 responding to the alarm. But they were minutes away, and the smoke was thickening. Kendra's mind raced through the building's layout, which she'd studied during pre-event safety checks. "There's a service corridor," she shouted over the chaos. "We can redirect evacuation through the kitchen." As if in response, the sprinkler system suddenly failed, letting the flames grow bolder. Kendra's heart pounded, not from exertion, but from the growing certainty that this was aimed at her, at them, at what she and Nolan had uncovered in his company's security protocols. Through the smoke-filled halls, she heard a familiar voice calling out for help. Moving on instinct, she pushed through a set of double doors into what had once been an elegant conference room. There, trapped behind a fallen decorative column, was Maureen Frost. "Kendra!" Maureen coughed, her designer dress smudged with soot. "I was looking for you both." "Save your breath," Kendra instructed, already assessing the situation. The column was too heavy to lift alone, but she could see a way to create leverage. "Rodriguez," she called out. "I need backup." As they worked to free Maureen, Kendra's mind raced with questions. What had Nolan's mother been doing in this part of the hotel? And where was Nolan? The thought of him sent fresh panic through her chest. She hadn't seen him since their kiss, since he'd looked at her with those storm-grey eyes full of unnamed emotions. Was he safe? Had the people behind this targeted him too? Finally, they managed to shift the column enough for Maureen to slip free. Despite her ordeal, she gripped Kendra's arm with surprising strength. "They were waiting," she whispered urgently. "I overheard them. They knew about the board meeting, about the security audit. They were looking for the evidence." Kendra's blood ran cold. The laptop, Nolan's laptop. He always has it with him. He was headed to the parking garage. Maureen coughed. Gao said something about backup files. Before Kendra could respond, another explosion rocked the building, this one from below. The parking garage. "No!" The word tore from her throat before she could stop it. Without thinking, she turned to run toward the stairs, but Rodriguez caught her arm. "Kendra, wait. The structural integrity. He's down there." The words came out raw, real, nothing fake about the fear in her voice. You have to think." Rodriguez's grip tightened. "You're one of my best, but you're also emotionally compromised right now." Emotionally compromised. The words hit her like a physical blow. When had this happened? When had their careful arrangement turned into something that could compromise her judgment? A crackle of radio static interrupted her thoughts. "Chief, we've got multiple victims in the garage level," a familiar voice reported. "Including a male, mid-30s, possible smoke inhalation." Kendra's world narrowed to a single point of focus. Protocol and procedure fell away. All she could think about was Nolan, his quiet strength, his carefully hidden vulnerability, the way he'd looked at her just before their first practice dance in the kitchen. "Get her out," she ordered Rodriguez, gesturing to Maureen. Then, before anyone could stop her, she was running toward the garage stairs, her bare feet silent against the emergency-lit steps. The garage was a maze of smoke and shadows, emergency lights casting eerie patterns through the haze. She could hear Engine 27's crew working nearby, but she was moving on instinct now, letting her firefighter's training guide her through the chaos. "Nolan!" Her voice echoed off concrete walls. "Nolan, answer me." A cough, weak but distinct, came from behind a row of luxury cars. She found him there, slumped against his car's wheel, his laptop clutched protectively to his chest. His perfect tuxedo was smudged with soot, his carefully tied hair coming loose around his face. "You're supposed to be evacuating," he managed between coughs, but his eyes, those expressive grey-blue eyes, were filled with relief at the sight of her. "To it, you're supposed to be smarter than this," she shot back, already checking him for injuries. Her hands moved with professional efficiency, but her heart was racing for entirely unprofessional reasons. "What were you thinking?" "Had to secure the evidence." He tried to sit up straighter, wincing. "They were waiting for us. Kendra, they knew about the audit, about everything we found. If they got their hands on this data." "Data isn't worth your life." The words came out fiercer than she'd intended, raw with emotions she'd been trying to deny. His hand caught hers where it rested on his chest, checking his breathing. "Some things are worth the risk." The double meaning in his words hung in the smoke-filled air between them. Kendra's carefully constructed walls began to crumble. This wasn't their arrangement anymore. This wasn't pretend. This was... A sharp crack overhead interrupted the moment. The ceiling was beginning to give way. "We need to move. Now." Kendra pulled Nolan's arm over her shoulder, supporting his weight. Together, they stumbled toward the exit, guided by the increasingly urgent shouts of the firefighting crew. Just before they reached safety, Nolan stumbled. As Kendra caught him, he turned to face her, his expression intense despite his obvious pain. "What I said before in the ballroom." "Later," she cut him off, but her voice was gentle. "We'll talk about everything later." As they finally emerged into the night air, thunder still rolling overhead, Kendra realized something that terrified her more than any fire. She wasn't ready for later, because later meant facing the truth about what was happening between them, about how their carefully crafted lie had somehow become the most honest thing in her life. The pearl bracelet on her wrist caught the flashing lights of emergency vehicles, a reminder of everything that had changed in one evening. As paramedics rushed forward to check Nolan, his hand slipped from hers, but the impression of his touch lingered, just like the memory of that unexpected kiss. Some fires, she was learning, couldn't be extinguished. Some burned beyond any hope of control, transforming everything they touched into something new, something real, something terrifyingly alive. The hospital waiting room buzzed with quiet tension as Kendra paced, still wearing her smoke-stained gala dress. Her bare feet made no sound on the polished floor. She'd lost her shoes somewhere between the ballroom and the garage. The golden beads in her braids caught the harsh fluorescent light with each turn, a rhythmic glimmer that matched her racing thoughts. "Mrs. Washington Frost." A nurse appeared with a clipboard. "Your husband is asking for you." Husband. The word hit differently now, charged with complications she couldn't ignore. She followed the nurse down the sterile corridor, her fingers automatically reaching for her knuckles to crack them, a nervous habit that felt inadequate for the storm of emotions she was facing. Nolan sat propped up in the hospital bed, his tuxedo jacket replaced by a standard-issue gown. His hair had come completely loose from its usual neat bun, falling around his face in a way that made him look younger, more vulnerable. The laptop sat secured in a police evidence bag beside his bed, the proof they'd nearly died protecting. "You look terrible," she said softly, trying for normalcy. His lips curved slightly. "You look beautiful." The words were rough from smoke inhalation, but his eyes, those expressive grey-blue eyes, were clear and focused entirely on her. "Nolan, we need to talk about what happened," he interrupted, then coughed. "Not just about the attack, about the kiss, about everything." Kendra's heart raced. "You should rest. The doctor said, 'I love you.'" The words hung in the air between them, as tangible as the smoke that had filled the garage. Kendra felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. "You don't," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "This is the adrenaline talking. The arrangement—" "Forget the arrangement." Nolan tried to sit up straighter, wincing. "I've been falling in love with you since the day you stormed into my office with that security report, challenging every assumption, refusing to back down. I've been falling in love with your strength, your integrity, your morning coffee ritual with those R&B playlists, the way you organize the spice rack by color instead of alphabetically just to drive me crazy." "Stop." The word came out more pleading than commanding. "Please. This isn't—" We agreed to a business arrangement," he acknowledged, But nothing about this has been business. Not the way you dance in the kitchen when you think I'm not watching. Not the way you leave me notes about eating actual meals instead of protein bars. Not the way I've memorized which songs make you smile on bad days. A knock at the door interrupted his declaration. Detective Myers stood in the doorway, his expression grim. "Mr. Frost, Mrs. Washington Frost, we need to discuss what happened tonight." The next hour was a blur of questions and statements. The fires had been strategically set, targeting specific areas. The attackers had detailed knowledge of the hotel's layout and security systems, and most importantly, they had been watching Nolan and Kendra, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "So as the evidence on your laptop," Myers explained, "proves systematic corruption at the highest levels of several tech companies. A lot of powerful people stood to lose everything if this went public." Kendra listened, her mind racing. All those late nights Nolan had spent working, the security protocols she'd flagged, the patterns they'd uncovered together. It was bigger than either of them had realized. "You'll both need protection," Myers continued. "At least until we can round up all the players involved." "We have the house," Nolan said immediately. "The security system won't be enough," Myers cut in. "We're talking about people with resources, connections. They'll try again." Kendra felt the weight of her grandmother's chain around her neck, where her wedding ring hung hidden. Everything was shifting, the lines between real and pretend blurring beyond recognition. "I'm not leaving him," she stated firmly, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. Nolan's hand found hers on the hospital bed, their fingers intertwining naturally. The touch sent electricity through her entire body, awakening every nerve ending. After Myers left, silence filled the room. Outside, a storm still raged, a remnant of the chaos that had transformed their evening. The pearl bracelet on Kendra's wrist caught the light as she finally turned to face Nolan fully. "I'm scared," she admitted, the words feeling like they were torn from her very soul. "Of the threats. Of this," she gestured between them. "Of feeling something real, of losing control, of—" her voice broke, "of needing someone again." Nolan tugged gently on their joined hands, pulling her closer until she perched on the edge of his bed. His free hand came up to touch her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "I'm scared too," he confessed softly. "Terrified, actually. But tonight, when I thought I might not see you again, when I was in that garage and couldn't breathe, all I could think about was how many things I hadn't told you, how many mornings I'd watched you make coffee and wanted to pull you close, how many nights I'd laid awake listening to you move around upstairs, wishing—" "Nolan," she whispered, her heart thundering. "I know you've been hurt," he continued. "I know you built walls to protect yourself, but Kendra, you ran into a burning building for me tonight. Let me be brave for you now." The monitor beside his bed beeped steadily, marking the moments as they stretched between them. Outside, thunder rolled, nature's percussion to match the rhythm of their shared heartbeats. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted finally. "I don't know how to let these walls down." "Yes, you do." His voice was gentle but sure. "You've been doing it brick by brick since the day you moved in. Every shared meal, every late-night conversation, every time you left sticky notes on my protein bars telling me to eat real food. Despite everything," Kendra felt a laugh bubble up. "Those things are not food. See?" His smile was soft, genuine. "That's the woman I love. The one who cares enough to lecture me about nutrition while organizing my kitchen in the most illogical way possible." "It's color-coded," she protested weakly, but she was smiling too. "It's chaos," he countered, then grew serious again. "Beautiful, wonderful chaos. Like falling in love with your best friend's wife, only to realize she was meant to be yours all along." The words hung between them, heavy with truth and possibility. Kendra felt her walls crumbling, not in the violent way she'd always feared, but gently, like autumn leaves finally letting go. "I think," she said slowly, "I've been falling in love with you too. And it terrifies me." Nolan's hand tightened on hers. "Good," he murmured, "because love should be a little terrifying. It means it's real." As if to punctuate his words, a final crash of thunder shook the windows. But this time, Kendra didn't flinch. She was too busy learning how it felt to be brave, to be vulnerable, to let someone in not because of an arrangement or a need, but because her heart had chosen him long before her mind caught up. The pearl bracelet gleamed in the hospital lights, no longer a prop in their performance, but a symbol of something genuine, something that had grown in the spaces between pretense and truth, in midnight dances and morning coffee, in shared dangers and unspoken desires. They had started with a lie, but somewhere along the way, it had become the most honest thing either of them had ever known. The safe house Detective Myers arranged sat on the outskirts of Atlanta, a modest cabin nestled among pine trees. Rain still fell steadily as Kendra helped Nolan from the unmarked police car, his arm warm around her shoulders despite the chill in the air. She'd changed from her ruined gala dress into rescue worker sweats, but she still wore the pearl bracelet, no longer a prop, but a reminder of how real everything had become. "Home sweet home," Nolan murmured as they entered, his voice still rough from smoke inhalation, at least temporarily. The cabin's interior was basic but comfortable, an open-plan living area with a small kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a study equipped with secure communications equipment. What caught Kendra's attention, however, was the wall of windows overlooking the forest, perfect for spotting approaching threats. "You're analyzing escape routes," Nolan observed, settling carefully onto the couch. His hair fell loose around his face, still smelling faintly of smoke, despite the hospital's attempts to clean him up. Force of habit. She moved to the kitchen, needing the comfort of routine. "You should rest while I check the perimeter." "Kendra," his voice stopped her. "Come here. Please." She turned to find him watching her with those intense grey-blue eyes that seemed to see right through her defenses. Slowly, she made her way back to the couch, perching on the edge like she might need to run at any moment. "We said things in the hospital," he began carefully. "Important things. And now I need to know if you're running from them or from the people trying to kill us." Trust Nolan to cut straight to the heart of the matter. Kendra found herself cracking her knuckles, a nervous habit she couldn't suppress. "Can't it be both?" "No." He caught her restless hands in his. "Because one of those things we can face together, and the other would break my heart." The raw honesty in his voice made her chest tight. "I meant what I said," she whispered. "About falling in love with you. About being terrified. But Nolan, look at our situation. We're in hiding. There are powerful people who want to silence us, and I'm still trying to process how my fake husband became the person I can't imagine losing." Thunder rumbled outside, but neither of them flinched. They'd faced worse storms together now. "You know what I remember?" Nolan's thumb traced patterns on her palm. "The first morning after you moved in, I was working late, as usual, and you came downstairs at 3 a.m. in those ridiculous fuzzy socks, playing Lauryn Hill on your phone. Instead of ignoring me or making polite conversation, you took one look at my protein bar dinner and made us both grilled cheese sandwiches." Despite everything, Kendra felt a smile tugging at her lips. "You needed real food." "I needed you," he corrected softly. "Oh, I just didn't know it yet." Before she could respond, both their phones buzzed, a secure message from Detective Myers. "Evidence analysis complete. Corruption network bigger than anticipated. Stay alert." Reality crashed back in. Kendra stood, moving to check the windows again. "We should establish a security protocol. Set up watches." "Hey." Nolan's voice was gentle but firm. "Come back to me." She turned to find him struggling to stand. "You shouldn't." But he was already moving toward her, slightly unsteady but determined. When he reached her, his hands came up to frame her face. "I know you're scared. Of the threats. Of the feelings. Of losing control. But Kendra Washington Frost, I'm not going anywhere. And neither are you." "You can't promise that," she whispered, even as she leaned into his touch. "Actually, I can." His lips curved into that rare, genuine smile she'd grown to love. "Because I've seen you fight fires, challenge corrupt executives, and run into danger to save others, you don't give up, and I'm not giving up on us." A rush of emotion hit her so hard, it nearly took her breath away. This man, this perfectly imperfect, stubbornly caring man, had somehow slipped past every defense she'd built. "I need to tell you something," she said suddenly, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "About my ex. About why I'm so afraid of needing someone." Nolan's expression grew serious, but his touch remained gentle. "Tell me." For the next hour, Curled together on the couch while rain fell outside, Kendra finally shared the full story of her past relationship. The control that had started so subtly, the isolation that grew like a cancer, the moment she'd finally found the strength to leave. Through it all, Nolan listened, his hands never leaving hers, his eyes never wavering. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then, carefully, he reached for his laptop bag. "I want to show you something." Inside was a small notebook, its pages filled with his neat handwriting. "I've been keeping this since you moved in," he explained. "Every day, I write down one thing that makes you smile. Not because I want to control you or change you, but because your joy became the highlight of my day." Kendra's vision blurred as she read random entries. Made spicy chicken for dinner. Real smile. Reached her eyes. Found her favorite R&B station playing in the car. Small smiler but genuine. Left sticky notes on my protein bars again. Smiled when she thought I wasn't looking. "This is who you are," Nolan said softly. "Strong, independent, caring, and absolutely impossible to control. And that's exactly who I fell in love with." A sob caught in her throat, but for the first time, it wasn't from fear. "When did you start keeping this?" "The day after the grilled cheese," he admitted. "I knew something was changing, even then." Outside, the storm was finally beginning to ease, but inside, something else was building, something warm and real and unstoppable. Kendra turned to face Nolan fully, letting him see everything in her eyes. "I want to try," she whispered. "Really try. Not for the housing program or the investigation or any other reason except that I'm in love with you." His smile was brighter than any she'd seen before. "I was hoping you'd say that." As he pulled her close, their foreheads touching, the last of her walls crumbled. She was done running, done hiding, done being afraid of her own heart. Whatever dangers lay ahead, they would face them together, not as part of an arrangement, but as partners who had found real love in the midst of pretense. The pearl bracelet caught the lamplight as she wrapped her arms around him, no longer a symbol of their deception, but a reminder of how the most genuine things can grow from unexpected beginnings. Outside, the rain softened to a gentle patter, nature's applause for two hearts finally finding their way home. 3 days in the safe house had established a new rhythm for them. Kendra would wake at dawn for perimeter checks, her firefighter's instincts never truly at rest. She'd return to find Nolan in the kitchen, his hair tied back loosely, brewing coffee in the French press he'd insisted on bringing. They'd share quiet mornings working through the evidence, their fingers intertwined when not typing or taking notes. But on the 4th morning, something was wrong. The forest was too quiet. Kendra noticed it during her rounds, the absence of birdsong setting off every internal alarm. She reached for her phone to alert Myers when she saw it, a glint of metal in the trees that shouldn't be there. "Nolan!" she called out, already running back to the house. "We've got company." She burst through the door to find him already in motion, securing the laptop and backup drives. Their eyes met across the room, a whole conversation passing without words. They'd prepared for this, had run through the scenarios countless times. "The tunnel," he said, grabbing their go-bags. The safe house had been built with an escape route, a maintenance tunnel that led to a hidden garage a quarter-mile away. But before they could move, the first shots shattered the living room windows. Kendra tackled Nolan behind the kitchen island, glass raining around them. His arms came around her protectively, but she was already thinking tactically. 8 seconds until they breach," she whispered, her mind racing. "The tunnel entrance is exposed. They'll be watching it." "Options." His voice was steady, trusting her expertise. Kendra scanned the room, years of emergency response training kicking in. The study, reinforced walls, secure comms to Myers. "We make our stand there." A battering ram hit the front door. 6 seconds. They moved in perfect sync, covering each other as they crossed to the study. Kendra's heart thundered, but her hands were steady as she barricaded the door. Behind her, Nolan was already establishing connection with Myers, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "Security teams are 10 minutes out," he reported. "We just have to—" The door shuddered under impact. Kendra's fingers found her grandmother's chain, the wedding ring a reminder of everything they were fighting for. "Get that evidence transmitted. I'll handle them." "Kendra," his voice cracked with emotion. "Trust me." She turned to face him fully, memorizing every detail. the intensity in his grey-blue eyes, the strand of hair escaped from his bun, the way his hands reached for her instinctively. "Always," he breathed, and pulled her in for a fierce kiss. The door splintered at its hinges. They broke apart, moving to their positions. Kendra took cover behind a heavy filing cabinet, her body coiled and ready. Nolan's fingers never stopped typing, racing to upload their evidence to secure servers. When the door finally gave way, all hell broke loose. Smoke grenades rolled in, filling the room with thick white clouds. But Kendra was used to smoke, had trained for this her entire career. She moved like a shadow, using the cover to her advantage. The first attacker went down to a precise strike to the knee. The second found himself thrown back into his companions. Through it all, she could hear Nolan's voice, steady and strong. 70% uploaded. Hang on. A burst of gunfire forced her to dive for new cover. Pain blazed across her arm. A graze. Nothing serious, but it brought everything into sharper focus. These men weren't just trying to stop the upload. They were here to silence them permanently. "Kendra!" Nolan's warning came just in time. She rolled away from a knife strike, coming up inside her attacker's guard. The pearl bracelet on her wrist caught the light as she countered, its delicate beauty a stark contrast to the violence. "Upload complete," Nolan announced. "Myers has it all." But their attackers weren't retreating. If anything, they became more desperate. One of them reached for something at his belt, a detonator. Time slowed. Kendra saw everything with crystal clarity. The explosive device already planted on the wall, Nolan's position by the computers, the distance between them. She had less than a second to make a choice. She chose him. She would always choose him. Her body moved before conscious thought, launching across the room. She slammed into Nolan just as the explosion rocked the study, taking them both through the reinforced window behind his desk. They hit the ground outside hard, Kendra's body shielding his from the worst of the impact. Rolling through the fall, she pulled them both up and running. Behind them, flames engulfed the study. But ahead she could hear sirens approaching. Help was coming. "You're hurt," Nolan gasped as they reached the tree line. "So are you," she countered, noting the cuts on his face from the window glass. "I love you," he said fiercely, and in that moment, with smoke in the air and danger all around, it wasn't a revelation or a confession. It was a fact, as solid as the ground beneath their feet. "I love you too," she replied, squeezing his hand. "Now run." They made it to the main road just as Myers and his tactical team arrived, screeching to a halt in a convoy of black SUVs. The firefight that followed was brief but intense. In the end, 4 corporate mercenaries were in custody, and the evidence that would expose the entire corruption network was safely in federal hands. As paramedics tended to their wounds, Kendra and Nolan sat together in the back of an ambulance, refusing to be separated. She leaned into him, exhausted but triumphant, while he played absently with her braids, his other hand never leaving hers. "You know what this means?" he murmured against her temple. "That we've brought down a major corporate conspiracy and nearly got killed in the process." "That too," his lips curved against her skin. "But I was thinking, now we can focus on our real future. No more pretending, no more arrangements." Kendra turned to face him, her heart full. "I haven't been pretending for a long time," she admitted softly. "Neither have I." His free hand came up to touch her cheek. "Marry me again. For real this time?" She laughed, the sound pure and free despite their injuries and exhaustion. "We're already married." "I want to do it right," he insisted. "With our friends, our family, with vows that aren't just for show, with a love that's been tested by fire and came out stronger." Around them, the morning sun was rising over the trees, burning away the last traces of smoke. Kendra touched the pearl bracelet on her wrist, thinking of how far they'd come from that first meeting in the diner. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." As he pulled her in for a kiss, she could taste their shared future on his lips. A future built not on arrangements or pretense, but on a love that had bloomed in the most unexpected garden. A love that had survived conspiracy, danger, and their own fears. A love that was finally and completely real. 1 year later, Kendra stood in front of a different mirror, in a different dress. The late autumn sunlight streamed through the windows of her old firehouse, transformed for today's celebration. Her wedding dress, ivory with subtle gold accents, hugged her athletic frame perfectly, complementing the fresh golden beads in her braids. Maureen's pearl earrings caught the light as she made final adjustments. "You look beautiful, darling," Maureen said, appearing behind her with misty eyes. She wore an elegant blue dress that matched her eyes, the eyes she'd passed on to her son. "Though I still say you didn't need a second wedding. The first one took quite well, if unexpectedly." Kendra laughed, touching the pearl bracelet that hadn't left her wrist in a year. "We needed this," she explained. "A celebration of what's real, not what we were pretending to be." The door opened, and Captain Rodriguez's wife, Maria, entered, carrying a small package. "Special delivery from your groom," she announced with a knowing smile. Inside the box, Kendra found a familiar leather-bound notebook, Nolan's journal of her smiles. But now it was filled with new entries, documenting their journey from pretense to truth. A note fell from between its pages. "For my real wife, who taught me that the most beautiful things grow from unexpected beginnings. Meet me at the altar. I'll be the one looking at you like you're my every answer. Entom girl, you're going to ruin your makeup," Maria warned, already reaching for tissues. But Kendra didn't cry. Instead, she felt a warmth spread through her chest, solid and sure as the foundation of the home they'd built together, not the one from the housing program, but the brownstone, where they'd first learned to dance around each other, now filled with both their lives completely intertwined. The past year had brought changes. The corporate corruption case had made national headlines. Nolan had transformed his company, implementing ethical practices that set new industry standards. Kendra had been promoted to lieutenant, her integrity and courage during the safe house incident earning her widespread respect. But the biggest changes were the quiet ones, the way they'd learned each other's rhythms, turning their careful choreography into a natural dance. How Nolan still left his coffee cups everywhere, but now they were accompanied by love notes. How Kendra still organized things by color instead of alphabet, but now she'd catch him smiling at the chaos instead of trying to fix it. A knock at the door announced Rodriguez. "It's time, Lieutenant." The firehouse's main bay had been transformed. Fairy lights twined around the engines, which had been polished to mirror shine. Her crew, dressed in their formal uniforms, stood alongside tech executives in suits. Two worlds merged into one. As the music started, not the traditional wedding march, but Lauryn Hill's "Can't Take My Eyes Off of You," Kendra took her first step toward her future, toward Nolan, who stood waiting exactly as promised, looking at her like she was his every answer. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, his long hair neat but loose the way she loved it. His grandmother's ring caught the light on his finger, no longer a prop, but a symbol of promises kept and renewed. When she reached him, his hands were steady as they took hers, the same hands that had offered her a business arrangement in a diner, that had danced with her in their kitchen, that had protected her in danger and held her in peace. "You know," he whispered as they turned to face the chaplain, "for a fake marriage, this turned out pretty real." "Nothing fake about us," she whispered back. "Not anymore. Their vows weren't traditional. How could they be?" Instead, they told their story, of two people who thought they were entering an arrangement, only to find something genuine in the spaces between pretense and truth. "I, Nolan Gregory Frost, take you, Kendra Simone Washington Frost, as my wife, for real, for always, and for every dance in our kitchen yet to come. I, Kendra Simone Washington Frost, take you, Nolan Gregory Frost, as my husband. No arrangements, no pretense, just truth and love and all our tomorrows." The reception that followed was a blend of their worlds. Firefighters danced with tech entrepreneurs. Maureen charmed everyone with stories of their whirlwind romance, while Rodriguez's wife Maria shared embarrassing tales of Kendra's rookie days. As evening fell, Nolan pulled Kendra onto the dance floor. The same song from their first practice dance played softly in the background. "Happy?" he asked, guiding her through a familiar turn. "More than," she replied, then smiled mischievously. "Though you still need to eat better than protein bars, and you still need to organize things in a way that makes sense." "Color coding makes perfect sense." Their playful argument was interrupted by the arrival of Detective Myers, now a close friend. Hate to talk business at your wedding, but thought you'd want to know the last of the conspirators pleaded guilty today. It's really over. Kendra felt Nolan's arms tighten around her slightly. They'd been waiting for this news, for the final chapter of their old story to close so their new one could begin completely free of shadows. Perfect timing, Nolan said, then turned back to Kendra with a glint in his eye that she'd learned to both love and fear. Now we can finally go on our honeymoon. We already had a honeymoon, she reminded him, though her heart raced at his expression. That was our fake honeymoon. This one's real. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. 2 weeks, just us, a beach, and absolutely no protein bars. Kendra laughed, the sound pure and free. Around them, their friends and family danced, the fairy lights twinkled, and their two worlds continued their perfect merge. But in that moment, it was just them, two people who'd found truth in fiction, love in arrangement, and home in each other's hearts. Later that night, as they swayed together in a quiet moment, Kendra's head rested on Nolan's shoulder. Her pearl bracelet caught the light, no longer a symbol of pretense, but a reminder of their journey. You know what I love most about our story, she murmured. What's that? That we stopped pretending just in time to find something real. Above them, the stars shone through the firehouse's high windows, witnesses to a love that had begun as an arrangement but had blazed into something true, tested by fire and time, stronger for every challenge overcome. And in the background, almost too soft to hear, Erykah Badu sang about love and truth, while two hearts beat in perfect synchronization, no longer dancing around each other, but moving together in a rhythm all their own. 5 years later, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sound of R&B classics floating through the brownstone's open windows. Kendra stood in her newly renovated kitchen, watching the sunrise paint Atlanta's skyline in shades of gold. Her firefighter's uniform hung ready by the door, lieutenant's bars gleaming, but she wasn't on shift for another hour. You're up early, Nolan's voice came from behind her, followed by his arms wrapping around her waist, his Bleu de Chanel cologne mixed with her Libre perfume, creating their signature scent. Couldn't sleep, she admitted, leaning back against him. Today's the big day. On their kitchen island lay a stack of papers, final approval for the Firefighters Family Housing Initiative, a program she and Nolan had developed together. It provided housing assistance to first responders regardless of marital status, correcting the very policy that had brought them together. Having regrets? He asked softly, his chin resting on her shoulder. Kendra turned in his arms, taking in his familiar features, the grey-blue eyes that still looked at her like she was his every answer, the long hair now streaked with a few strands of silver. About changing the policy that led me to you? Never, but it feels right. Making sure no one else has to fake a marriage to find a real love. His smile was soft, understanding. Speaking of real love, he gestured toward their renovated living room, where photos told their story, their second wedding at the firehouse, the opening of their joint foundation for ethical tech practices, and their most recent addition, a sonogram picture framed in silver. Kendra's hand drifted to her still flat stomach, where their first child was just beginning to grow. The pearl bracelet on her wrist caught the morning light as she moved. Think we should tell your mother today? She's been asking for grandchildren since our real wedding. I think she knew before we did. Nolan laughed, just like she knew we were falling in love when we were still pretending not to be. As if on cue, Kendra's phone buzzed with a text from Maureen. Don't forget dinner tonight, darlings. And Kendra, maybe skip the spicy foods. Just a feeling. They both burst out laughing. How does she always know? Kendra wondered, shaking her head. Same way she knew to give you those pearl earrings, Nolan replied, touching one gently. She sees truth, even when we're trying to hide it. The morning sun filled their kitchen, the same kitchen where they'd first danced, first cooked together, first realized they were falling in love. Now it was truly theirs, organized in their own unique way. Spices arranged by color, Kendra's system, but with alphabetical labels underneath, Nolan's compromise. I have something for you, Nolan said suddenly, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small, wrapped package. Inside, Kendra found a new leather-bound notebook. Still keeping track of my smiles, she teased. Always, he replied seriously. But open it. The first page held a single entry. Today, watching the sunrise, knowing our child will grow up in a home built on truth, love, and the occasional protein bar, which are still not real food. Kendra felt tears welling up, happy ones, the kind that came more easily now that her walls were long gone. "I love you," she whispered. "No pretense, no arrangement, just truth, just truth," he agreed, pulling her close. "Says, and speaking of truth, you did hide all my protein bars again, didn't you? In the color-coded pantry," she grinned. "If you can find them, you can keep them." Their laughter echoed through their home, their real home, built not from a housing program requirement, but from years of love, trust, and choosing each other every day. Outside, Atlanta was waking up. Somewhere, a fire engine's siren wailed. In a few hours, Kendra would be back at her station, saving lives and leading her crew. Nolan would be at his office, continuing to transform the tech industry with ethical innovations. But right now, in their kitchen filled with morning light and the scent of coffee, they were just Kendra and Nolan, two people who had found the truest love in the midst of a beautiful lie. As Lauryn Hill's voice drifted through their home, they swayed together in their morning dance, the pearl bracelet catching the light, marking the rhythm of their shared heartbeats and the promise of all their tomorrows yet to come. The end. If you were in Kendra's shoes, would you have the courage to accept a marriage of convenience? What impacted you more? Her fear of giving herself to a new love due to the trauma of the previous abusive relationship, or the way Nolan showed his love through small daily gestures, like the diary where he wrote down her every smile? In a world where relationships are increasingly complex, how far would you go for a dream? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.